Okay, people at home, can somebody turn on their camera and nod if you can hear me? Anybody? You can hear me. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Fantastic. Look at all the people. Wow, that's great. Welcome. Thank you for showing up at 5 o'clock on Tuesday. Thank you. Wow. It's going to be a good evening. So this is a session that is designed to do really an overview. I have a ton of students who don't know any lawyers. They have no idea what law school is. They're not really sure how to get there. And so this is definitely going to be the basics. So I apologize if I'm going over stuff that you guys already know, but there will be people here who don't know it, right? If you have questions, if you can ask them. I'm gonna have to, well, how to do this. I'll make this disappear. Okay, we're not going to be able to do that. All right, so instead, folks at home, you are actually going to have to use your chat. I apologize, but please hold questions till the end if that's okay. All right, so I apologize, that's not going to work because I can't show you the slides and I just can't. This is why I need to be in the same room all the time. So for those of you who are like really truly brand new to this and just sort of thinking about going to law school, if you want to be a lawyer, right? And being a lawyer in this case means not just having a law degree, but actually being able to practice, right? And being able to practice law by representing individuals in legal forums like courtrooms and filing documents and representing them in arbitration, all of that good stuff. You need to be a licensed attorney. And to get to be a licensed attorney, there are 3 basic steps. The first is to get a bachelor's degree, which you are all in the process of doing right now. Then you will go to a law school, right, which does not have to bear any relationship to the place where you went to undergrad. And you will get what's called a JD, a Juris Doctorate. That is the basic legal degree. Law is confusing because in every other discipline, you get your bachelor's, then a master's, then a doctorate. In the law, you get a bachelor's, then you get a Juris Doctorate, and then you get a master's of law. But you don't really need the master's of law. It's just out there. But a lot of times people think that's the first step, and it's not. Your first step after your undergraduate career is a JD, a Juris Doctorate. After you finish your JD, then you will need to apply for the bar to become a member, a licensed member of the bar in whatever state or jurisdiction you're planning to practice in. So like I said, the first step, which you are all in the process of doing right now, is to get that undergraduate degree. Absolutely any 4-year degree is fine. A Bachelor of Science, a Bachelor of Arts, a Bachelor of Fine Arts, a Bachelor of Business Administration, a Bachelor of Applied Arts and Sciences. It does not matter. It does not matter what your major is. You just need that 4-year degree, right? You have to have that. That said, you do want to get good grades because your grades will help determine where you get into law school. And you want to spend your time in college building the skills that you're going to need once you get to law school. It's not about learning content. It's not about learning the law or learning history or anything like that. You can spend your time studying anthropology. That's fine, as long as you are building the core skills that you're going to need down the road. And we'll talk a bit about what those are in a second. You should also spend time while you're an undergrad building relationships. First of all, that is a skill that you will need, the ability to network and build relationships with people. But in addition, when it comes time to apply for law school, you will need letters of recommendation. And you want those letters to be rich and full. And the only way you're going to get good letters is if people know you. So I know we're over 44,000 students now. That makes it difficult to get to know your professors, but you need to do that. And then outside of your coursework, find opportunities to demonstrate the skills that you have and the values that you hold. If that's working at Chipotle because you have to put, food on the table and pay your rent, that's fine. You don't need to be Superman and do 87 different things, but be the best Chipotle employee you can be and look for opportunities to demonstrate your skills at whatever it is you're doing. That step 2 is to get a Juris Doctorate from a law school that is accredited by the American Bar Association. It is very important to go to an accredited law school. There are law schools out there that aren't accredited, so you need to check. And the reason it's important to go to an ABA accredited law school is that California, for example, has a lot of unaccredited law schools. People who graduate from unaccredited law schools in California can generally take the California bar and practice in California, but they cannot take the bar or be licensed anywhere else in the entire country. They are now stuck in California if they want to continue to be lawyers. That's just all there's no way around that. They would have to go back and start law school all over again if they wanted to practice in another state. You don't want to do that. In addition, there are some jobs that will not hire people from unaccredited law schools. For example, the federal government will not hire somebody who graduated from an unaccredited law school, even if they passed the bar. Doesn't matter, right? That's just a requirement. So you definitely want to make sure you're going to an accredited school. That Juris Doctorate is going to take 3 years if you go to law school full-time. It's going to take 4 years if you go part-time. That's not at least 3 years. It's 3 years or 4 years. You don't get to pace yourself in law school. You have to take whatever the prescribed load is every single semester until you're done.
Does that include summer semesters or full-time?
Question is, does that include summer semesters? Typically, no. Baylor has like a weird thing where they also offer classes in the summer, and it actually allows you to graduate a little bit faster, but that's not, I think, a good idea, because your summers are when you get those jobs that you hope will then turn into permanent employment afterwards. That is your opportunity to network with the people who are going to hire you. So I wouldn't want to give those summers up, and most law schools do not offer credit over the summer. So we're talking about 2 long semesters, then you spend your summer working, doing research, doing something, and then you come back and start again. Okay. The last step, again, is to apply for the bar in whatever jurisdiction you want to practice in. That involves taking the bar exam in the state where you want to practice. It involves taking something called the Multi-State Professional Responsibility Exam, which is an ethics exam. And then you have to submit an application. The application to be a member of the bar is a whole big thing, right? It is an ordeal. They want to know everything about your life, where you've lived for the last 15 years, all of your addresses. They want to know if you have ever owed more than $500. They want to know it's actually a very rigorous process, and there are things that can keep you out of the practice of law. For example, some criminal convictions can prevent you from practicing law. In some states, there are certain mental health conditions that can prevent you from practicing law, which may or may not be fair, but that's the way it is. So it's important to look into those bar requirements wherever it is that you want to practice. Once you are licensed, once you practice the bar and or pass the bar and are admitted, for the rest of your legal career, in order to maintain your license, you have to take continuing legal education credits. So you'll go, these are often like rubber chicken lunches where somebody gets up and talks about something, right? They're not, it's not like taking a class like you're taking a class now. These are more like workshops, but you do have to do them and you have to log those credits in order to keep your license. Okay, expectations, yes. We'll get there. Yeah, we're gonna get there. Sorry, that's before you go to law school. So yeah, we'll get there. So expectations in law school. You need skills, right? The skills you need are brain skills, right? Thinking skills. You need to have the ability to read dense texts very closely and carefully, right? Commas matter, and you need to be able to like follow that. You need to have good critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. That actually includes a level of creativity, right? Thinking of novel ways to apply the law to a situation can be very, very helpful. The law is a very analytical field. I often hear people say that you don't need math to be a lawyer. I mean, technically that's true, but in my opinion, lawyers do with ideas what mathematicians do with numbers. It's the same kind of thinking. It's very analytical. You also need good writing skills. Oral communication is great, but it's actually not nearly as important as your writing skills. Your writing skills are paramount. In addition, you need some like character, right? You need to have integrity because you are going to be entrusted with people's lives and their livelihoods. It's a huge responsibility. You have to have excellent time management skills because if you take on too many cases and you miss a deadline, your client loses. There's no like, oh, I'm really sorry this is late. You show up a minute after the clerk of court's office closes and your client's just out of luck, right? So excellent time management skills are really, really important. And you need a level of professionalism and maturity, right? Which I guess kind of goes without saying, but it's important to remember. Your first year in law school is hands down the worst, right? Years 2 and 3 pale in comparison to year 1, in part because your first year in law school, you are learning to think and to study and to learn in a totally different way. Your first year in law school, no matter where you go to school, they are going to hand you your schedule. Here are the classes you are taking and when you are taking them. You don't get a say in that, right? Here's your schedule. Typically, that's going to be 5 courses. You're probably going to have at least 100 pages of reading in each course a week, at least, right? So you're going to be reading a lot. First year classes also tend, not everywhere, but generally, faculty will use what's called the Socratic method, which is scary, but it's actually very helpful. Basically, the professor will start asking you questions, right? They'll cold call on you and they'll start asking you questions and help you tease out the information and the analysis from the case. It's mortifying if you can't answer a question, but it happens to everybody, so don't freak out. Most law school classes also, your first year, are going to use high stakes testing at the end of the term, and that is it. One test, that's your whole grade. So there are schools like UNT Dallas School of Law has started to incorporate things like quizzes to help scaffold that process, but it can be very, very, very anxiety inducing to only have everything riding on that one test. Law schools also use something called a curve. The curve sounds good, right? Because you're probably used to a curve, meaning if a test is really hard, everybody gets 5 extra points, right? That is not what the law school curve is. Not at all. You can actually look up each individual law school's curve policy in their student handbook. But what the curve typically is the percentage of students in the class who will get an A, the percentage that will get a B, and the percentage that will get a C. So you might have written a brilliant exam, but if everybody else did better, you're getting a C. Right? Doesn't matter how smart you are. That curve has a tendency to instill a lot of competition between law students. In addition, your class rank your first year matters for a whole bunch of things. It matters for getting jobs. It matters for getting onto law review. That also can instill a really competitive nature in law school. So the result is that this can be very, very high stress. But remember that everybody is stressed and people survive all the time, right? They get through it. But you do want to be prepared for that kind of emotional overload because people do burn out sometimes. People really can crash and burn that first year. And you want to go into it prepared for what's going to happen and with a plan for how you're going to manage your stress levels. Once you get past your 1L year, more of your classes are going to be seminars and practicums. You're going to be writing more papers. Most, if not all states now have something called a third-year practice rule, which allows third-year law students to represent clients under the supervision of a licensed attorney. So most law schools have a bunch of clinics where you will represent actual clients. So you might work in a family law clinic or in an immigration clinic, and you will have actual people going through actual divorces or actually trying to get citizenship in the US, which is super cool. But again, it can be high pressure. There are also a number of extracurricular activities in law school, much like you have now. And some of those can really improve the odds of you getting certain types of jobs. For example, if you want to be an appellate lawyer, right, like argue appeals in front of the Supreme Court, that sort of thing, you really want to be on moot court, right? You really want to have that experience. Law review, working on a journal, writing articles and editing them can help you get clerkships afterwards, which is really helpful, really nice jobs. You'll also be doing internships and externships, working for firms and judges and such while you're in law school. And you'll be networking a lot because those jobs you get your first summer hopefully turn into the job you get your second summer, and hopefully that turns into the job you get forever, right? So the whole process is very cumulative. It's not like you wait until the last semester of law school and then start thinking about getting a job. You're thinking about it all the time. Grades matter. Your grades matter now in terms of getting into law school, but your law school grades matter too, because like I said, they rank students. You will know where you stand relative to everyone else in your class. And that's what you're going to put on your resume. You're not going to put your GPA because that doesn't really mean anything, right? Nobody knows what the scale is. But if you say I'm 15th out of 400 students, that says a lot. If instead you have to say I'm, 392nd out of 400 students, that's not as good, right? If you're at Harvard, it's actually still okay. You're going to get a job. But
I was just gonna ask that, like,
yeah, you can.
if you're 392nd out of 400 at Harvard Law School, does that outweigh 15 out of 400 at just a regular school?
It's apples and oranges. It's hard to compare. But this was one reason why going to a good law school or a school with a good reputation in the field you want to enter, in the jurisdiction you want to enter, is helpful, because they're going to cut you a little more slack. Right. Okay. Getting into law school. Now we're going to talk about the LSAT. So the components of your application are actually not that horrible, I don't think. this process is very centralized. It all goes through an organization called LSAC, which is the Law School Admissions Council. You will ultimately give them so much of your money, you will grow to hate them. But they actually make this process easier than it used to be because everything goes through this hub, right? You will need transcripts from every school that has given you a higher ed grade. So that includes the community colleges that oversaw your dual credit in high school, any school you went to for a random semester sometime. You'll need to have all of those transcripts sent to LSAC, and they will recalculate your GPA, and they will provide that information to the law schools. So you just have to send them once. You'll have your LSAT score. They're the people who administer the test. And they'll have your writing component for the LSAT. And we'll talk about that in just a second. You will need letters of recommendation, typically 2. Some schools will allow you to submit a 3rd or even sometimes a 4th, but count on needing 2. Okay. You will write a personal statement, which is typically about 2 double-spaced pages. It's very short. It's very hard to say something meaningful about yourself in 2 pages. That's what I'm here for, is to help you with that. You'll have a resume, which is just a resume, but it's like a business resume from 1985. Law is a very conservative field still. I would not have these tattoos if I were still working in the legal profession, honestly. I also wouldn't have anime hair if I were still working in the legal profession. So it's a very old school resume, but it's a resume, right? And again, I can help you format whatever you currently have to make it look appropriate. Then there are the addenda. The addenda are optional for some people. An academic addendum is an opportunity to explain bumps and bruises on your transcript. Maybe there was a semester where you were taking care of a sick relative and your grades suffered, or you yourself became ill, or you were going through a divorce. You know, things happen, right? And your academic addendum is a chance to say, this is why I have this period of low grades on my transcript. A diversity addendum is exactly what it sounds like. Many law schools really prioritize diversifying their class. That doesn't just mean race and ethnicity, certainly doesn't mean gender anymore, because women are actually more than 50% of the incoming law school class at just about every law school now. But it includes, certainly does include race and ethnicity, and it includes perspective. So if you are an older student, for example, who's already had a career, or if you were in the military, or if you grew up here in a little town in Texas, right? That might shape the way you see the world and the law, and law schools want that diversity of perspective. So this is another opportunity to talk about that, how you are going to contribute to that diverse community. And then there's something called a character and fitness addendum. If you need to write one, it's not optional, but not everybody needs one. A character and fitness addendum is a report of every criminal violation in your whole life. Sometimes they want to know about speeding tickets. They want to know about juvenile and expunged records. You think expunged means it's gone. It doesn't. They can still find it. They're going to want to know about any time you were on academic probation or suspension. They're going to want to know about any conduct violations like burning candles in the dorm. They're going to want to know about any allegations of academic misconduct. The vast majority of the time, those things will not keep you out of law school. But failure to disclose something is the worst sin you can possibly commit during this process. This is not apocryphal. This is about the guy who sat next to me in contracts. His name was Steve. He was a nice guy. Steve failed to disclose something on his law school application. Law school didn't catch it, but then he applied for the bar and he failed to disclose it then also. State Bar of Virginia 100% caught it, and they contacted my law school and said, why did your person not disclose this thing? And the law school said, Well, this is news to us. And they went back and they discovered he hadn't disclosed it on his application. And do you know what happened? They rescinded his diploma. He had 3 years of law school debt and 3 years spent in law school and no law degree to show for it. So for the love of God, if you have to disclose something, disclose it. Because really, it's probably not going to matter.
Can't share with us what it was.
My recollection, no, because I don't know, like, I know that this happened, but I didn't talk to him about it. But the word on the street is that it was like a DUI or something. It was nothing that would have kept him out of law school. Nothing. Big mistake. So disclose. Some law schools will also let you submit an additional addendum, some even require it, about why you want to go to this particular law school. You don't have to write that. In some cases, the answer is obvious, like, I want to go to this law school because it's a good law school and I think I might be able to get in, right? That's fair. But if you do have a real reason for wanting to go to a specific school, sometimes this is an opportunity to share that with them. Now we're definitely going to talk about the LSAT. So the LSAT is the law school admissions test. The format has changed a lot over the last few years, COVID related, obviously. Right now, the test consists of a writing section that you take separate from the rest of the test. You can take it at any time. You take it on your own computer, but it is timed and they record you taking it, just like with Respondus Lockdown Browser at UNT, right? The writing section always involves some information and you pick a side and you make a persuasive argument. I still remember mine. It was about whether a farmer should grow corn or wheat in his field. I assure you, I knew nothing about horticulture. They give you everything you need to know. You just pick a side and argue it, right? The rest of the test, you will right now, assuming they don't go back to in-person testing, right now, they will give you a time, right? Kaylin, let's say you're taking the test in November. You are taking the test. No, you're not. So maybe they say, okay, your time is 10 a.m. on November 13th. That means that at 10 a.m. on November 13th, you need to be in a quiet room by yourself with no other computers or people. I guess that's by yourself. With your computer and a webcam and a microphone. And you'll log in through special software that will prevent you from doing anything else on your computer. And there will be a random person who works for ProctorU watching you the whole time through your camera, which is creepy, but that's what they do. And you will do 4 35-minute sections with a 10-minute break in the middle. The sections right now are 3 scored sections and what's called an experimental section. The experimental section is a section that they're testing out for a future test. So your score for that doesn't count, but you don't know which section is the experimental section, right? So you'll do an analytical reasoning section, which are what we call the games, the logic games. You'll do a logical reasoning section. I'll show you a question in just a minute. And then there's a reading comprehension section. That 4th section will look like one of those, right? It might be another reading comp section. So maybe you take the test and you get 2 reading comp sections. You know only one of them counts, but you don't know which one counts, right? That makes sense? These are all multiple choice. And you do not need to know any content. They are all reasoning based, right? It's all reasoning and logic. For example, this is a sample logical reasoning question. I just pulled it off the LSAC website. The logical reasoning questions tend to be fairly short. So Laird says, pure research provides us with new technologies that contribute to saving lives. Even more worthwhile than this, however, is its role in expanding our knowledge and providing new unexplored ideas. And then Kim says, your priorities are mistaken, Blair. Saving lives is what counts most of all. Without pure research, medicine would not be as advanced as it is. And then your task is to figure out what is the basis for their disagreement. Give you a minute and see who knows the answer. Oh. How many of you think the answer is A? How many of you think the answer is B? How many of you think the answer is C? How many of you think the answer is D? Anybody think the answer is E? The answer is D. Kim doesn't necessarily think that there's no value beyond saving lives, but she does think that saving lives is the most important value of research. So it's that is the point on which they disagree. Kim thinks saving lives is the most valuable aspect of pure research. Laird says that expanding knowledge and providing new ideas is more important than saving lives. That's how it is. Note, you do not need to know anything that you don't even need to know what pure research is, right? You don't need to have a definition for that. Everything you need is in the question, right? That is the beauty of the LSAT. Here's the kicker. I don't know when most of you are going to be taking the test, but change is a coming to the LSAT. For the first time, my mom took basically the same LSAT that is being offered right now. I certainly did, and it was over 30 years ago. The test has really not changed much. The logic games are going bye-bye. We don't know exactly when, sometime in 2024, and we have no idea what they're replacing them with. But stay tuned. So if you are going to be taking the test in 2024 or after 2024, you may want to first be on the lookout for news about the change and focus on the other sections and not the games, the analytical reasoning section. It is going away. I can't even look at it. It's my heart. The test itself, so in terms of the number of scored questions, you're probably at this point going to, because there are now only 3 scored sections, your raw score is going to be between 0 and about 70, 75. Used to be 4 scored sections. Like I said, they keep changing things. That raw score, though, is then transitioned into, it's translated into a scaled score that runs between 120 and 180. I have no idea why. Kind of arbitrary, but that's the scale, right? That scaled score will also be translated into a percentile. That's actually, honestly, the most important thing to know. That's what law schools are going to be looking at. They're going to know, for example, that a 173 is the 99th percentile, right? Which means that 99% of the people who took the test did worse than that. So if you got a 173, that's awesome, right? You're in the top 1% of test takers. If you scored higher than that, you're doing even better. Make sense? The distribution. So this is this lists the raw score of 90, which now we do not get to because this is from back when there were 4 scored sections. So there were actually like 98, 99 questions on the test. But this shows you how a raw score relates to a scaled score, relates to a percentile. Right? And this is the basic distribution. This actually is still pretty much what the distribution will look like. You'll see this is the average, right, which is usually between a 151 and a 152. But note that, like, on the low side, below the average, everybody's kind of lumped up close to that. There are a lot of people who score in the high 140s, right? On this side, you'll see that this tail is attenuated. The higher up you get, the harder and harder it is to get another point, right? The difference between a 149 and a 150 is not that big. The difference between a 173 and a 174 is like dragging yourself over the finish line by your fingernails, right? It can be very challenging. Every loss, people always ask me, what do I need to get? Depends on the school. Schools are very different in terms of how selective they are and what they're looking for. If you want to go to UT, I really recommend you be in the high 160s. They will accept people with lower LSAT scores, but their median is, I think, like a 167 or 168. It's quite high. SMU, Baylor, and A&M, their medians are all right around 159, 160 at this point. UNT's law school, their median is right around a 152. So it's less selective. I've had people from UNT law, though, tell me that below a 147, they really probably wouldn't accept you. Does that mean there's no chance? No. But it's gonna be a push if you're at below about a 147. Does that make sense? This is a very studyable test. I promise you. Some of these question types look completely impossible, but once you start learning the tips and tricks, it gets a lot easier to do. The timeline for those of you who are planning to apply. Right now, doesn't matter whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, grad student, right? No matter who you are, right now, you definitely want to be getting the best grades you possibly can, right? Even if you had a really rocky start to your undergraduate career, finishing strong helps, right? They're definitely going to weigh those later grades more than the earlier grades. So now is the time to rally, right? Build those relationships that are going to turn into good recommendations, that are going to turn into jobs, etc. Explore the profession, make sure this is what you want to do. Law school is hella expensive. You do not want to incur that kind of debt if this is not going to be a good path for you. So you definitely want to make sure this is what you want to do before you take the plunge. Even if you're a first-year student, you can start looking around at law schools, see what's out there, see how they differ from each other, find out what you like, what you are going to value in a law school, right? If you want to practice family law in Denton, please don't go to Harvard, right? That's a terrible idea, honestly. I mean, Harvard's fantastic, obviously, but you're going to have Harvard debt and a network of people at Big Law, and you want to practice in the courthouse in McKinney, on McKinney, right? Doesn't make a lot of sense. But if your goal is to go to one of the top tier law firms in New York City, don't go to UNT Dallas. Again, that would be a mistake. So you want to, every law school has its pluses and its minuses, and you want to figure out what are the things that matter to you, what's going to get you where you want to go, because that answer is going to be different for everybody, right? And like I said, now is always a good time to be developing and demonstrating your skills and your values, right? If you, for example, write a personal statement about how much you love animals, but they look at your resume and you've never worked at an animal shelter, you've never taken a class or been in a club or done anything that relates to animals, they're going to want to know why not, right? Or if you say in your personal statement, I'm passionate about social justice, but you've never volunteered anywhere. If you've had a job, obviously that might be an explanation for that. But if you say you're passionate about social justice and they look and they see that you were president of your sorority, but you never did any volunteer work, they're going to question it, right? You want to be able to present who you are clearly and persuasively. When you're about 2 years out, right? 2 years before you're going to start. Incidentally, law schools almost all are going to require that you start in the fall. There are a few schools that have spring start programs, but not many. So about 2 years before you want to start, that's when we're going to get down to brass tacks, right? That's when we're going to start to get real serious, ideally. That's when you're going to start winnowing down that list of law schools, which seems like an overwhelming task. But remember, you want to go to an accredited law school, and there are only about 220 accredited law schools in the whole country. So you can start with on the Canvas course for UNT pre-law, there is a spreadsheet of all of those law schools. You start with it, right? And then start crossing things off. Right? I do not want to go to Minnesota, right? Cross off all the Minnesota schools. I don't want to go to Florida. Cross off all the Florida schools. Whatever it is that can like help you start to winnow that down, your junior year is a good time to start doing that. I also recommend starting to study for the LSAT fall of your junior year. I am a huge fan of the Brisket method of studying, low and slow, rather than like 2 months of intensive studying. This is a skill, it's not content, right? You wouldn't decide, I'm going to master the flute, I'm going to give myself 2 months to practice 20 hours a day. That's not how you learn the flute, right? You want to give yourself plenty of time and a humane schedule to prepare for this test. In the spring of your junior year, that's when you're going to want to start visiting law schools if you can, and start brainstorming a personal statement. You don't have to have it written yet. Let's start thinking about it. How do you want to present yourself? What is the thing you want them to know about you, right? Or you're selling yourself, you're branding yourself. And then the summer between your junior and senior year, assuming you're going straight, ideally that's when you would take the LSAT. It's also okay to take it fall of your senior year, totally cool. Some people will even take it January of their senior year. That's starting to get real close to application deadlines, but you can do it. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
How many times can you take the LSAT?
Excellent question. So I really encourage you to plan on one and done. Take it once, do it right, and then you're done. It's an expensive test. It costs $200 just to take the test. And it's emotionally exhausting. So ideally do it once. If you need to take it more than once, law schools do look at your highest score. They're going to see all of your scores, but in theory, they only consider your highest. You are allowed to take the test right now 3 times per cycle, which is a calendar year from like June to June, 5 times in 5 years, and 7 times over the course of your life. And then you're done. That's it, no more. I have had students take it 7 times. I would not recommend that, really. But if you take it once and something goes wrong, right? Like you get sick or you get there and you realize, oh shit, I really didn't study well enough. You can absolutely take it again, right? There's no real penalty for that other than you have to do it and you have to pay for it. Yes.
If you take an advanced test, can you talk about it in the academic addendum that you were talking about?
So if you've taken the test, so you do have some time right after you take the test to cancel your score, right? Like if you got sick in the middle of it, you know your score is going to suck. Just cancel it, right? You're going to have to retake it anyway. If you cancel your score, the law schools will see a C. They'll know that you canceled it. Canceling it once, you probably don't even have to address that. But if you cancel a couple of times, they're going to start to wonder, what are you doing? What are you thinking that you keep taking this test and canceling it? And at that point, yes, you can write an addendum to explain what happened. That is another possible addendum topic. Okay. Again, this is all ideal. Some people do a lot of this stuff much later, but ideally, you will submit your applications fall of your senior year. The applications for fall of 2023 opened on September 1st. Some of them actually opened on August 15th. And there are people who have already been admitted, right? That's why it's good to get in kind of early, because law schools use what are called rolling admissions. If you wait till close to the deadline for applications, there will still be seats, but it's not going to be the whole class that's open, right? They may have already admitted people to fill up half of their seats. So now you're competing for half the number of positions, right? So getting your application in good, like as good as you can make it, but early is nice. So fall of your senior year, you're going to want to submit your transcripts. You're going to want to finalize all those written components of your application, and you're going to want to secure your letters of recommendation. It's a push. That's why I, again, recommend taking the LSAT in the summer, starting thinking about your personal statement early. Like the more you can cross off the list, the easier this application process is. Okay, the support that you have at UND. You have if you are still thinking about whether law school is a good fit, come talk to me. I don't just abandon people. If we determine law school isn't a good fit for you, I will help you try to figure out what is a good fit and point you towards people who can help you with that. I do a lot of work on people's personal statements. I will brainstorm with you at the beginning. I will edit at the end. I'm full service in that regard. I review all of your documents. I will tell you that your font is ugly or you need to work on justification of your columns. Everything, right? We'll make sure everything is as pretty as we can possibly make it. I can also help with navigating LSAC. If I don't have an answer to a question, I'm a member of a listserv of all the pre-law advisors in the whole country. And I am not afraid to ask questions. So if I don't have the information, I can get it for you. And then I also help people with identifying law schools. I've helped people negotiate scholarships. I used to joke that I'll help you rent the U-Haul when it's time to go. I really want all of you who do this to succeed. I'm so excited when I hear where people are going. So use me. I want you to get into the best possible law school for you. We also have a bunch of information out there. I have an email list that I use to send out information about events like this, but we have lots of events on campus. We're going to have 2 law schools here next week. We're doing a workshop this Saturday on LinkedIn and resumes and personal statements. There are so many things that that we offer at UNT, and my email list is a good way to find out about them.
So I did apply for the workshop on this Saturday.
Hey.
Is there a way to log those, or are they able to be logged as hours, or like, like, I don't know,
It's ours.
hours, but like, that you went to that workshop or what you work on a personal statement?
Oh, you don't really need a record of that. I'll know that you were there. You'll get brownie points from me for coming. But nobody else is going to care. But I'm glad you're coming. I think it's going to actually be a lot of fun. We also have social media and a Canvas course. Long time ago, I stopped using the actual website they gave me for all of the information because I have to maintain it myself. I suck at that. Canvas is much easier for me to maintain. So the pre-law Canvas course has tons of information, checklists, worksheets, links to resources that are helpful, all sorts of stuff on that Canvas course. You can self-enroll if you're currently a student, and that way it shows up on your Canvas dashboard. But even if you are gone, if you've graduated, you can still access the information. And I'm a lifelong service. So if you decide to take time off after undergrad before law school, you still have a pre-law advisor. I've worked with people who graduated 20 years ago, right? My job never ends. You also have 2 pre-law ambassadors. We have great ambassadors this year, JC Freeman and Adetola Badeojo. Always say her name wrong. They are both just incredible resources. They are fantastic. We also have, I'm glad, Kristen, yes, I'm here for you. We also have 2 group meets because that just seemed like the thing to do. One is for sort of general chit chat and announcements, meeting other people, that sort of thing. The other is specifically for people who are looking to hook up with people to study for the LSAT. Sometimes things are more fun in groups. And then we have 2 pre-professional organizations at UNT. We have a chapter of Phi Alpha Delta, which is the International Legal Fraternity, and we have an undergraduate chapter of the National Black Law Students Association. Both groups are fantastic and are very similar in what they do. They bring speakers to campus, they go on trips to law school, they have some social events. Both organizations are organizations that have undergraduate chapters and law school chapters and alumni chapters. So these are organizations you can join and be active in for the rest of your life. You are welcome to be in both or either, or not at all. You don't have to do a pre-law fraternity, like it's not required. But if you're looking for people, especially if you're in a major where there aren't a lot of pre-law students, it can be really nice to connect with other people who are going through the same things.
Does it cost money to join?
Yes. So I don't know the fee structure for NBLSA, but they do, I believe, have like semester-based dues. I know for Phi Alpha Delta, to join the national organization, $125, but it's a one-time fee. And then you are a member for life, and then it's $20 per semester for the chapter.
So to join the fraternity, is it like, do you have to live on campus?
No. You do have to be enrolled as a student. That's part of the national both national organizations require that you be enrolled as a student. I'm not sure if you have to be an undergraduate student. Might be open to grad students also, but you do not have to live on campus. And these are not fraternities like Greek fraternities, right? These are just pre-professional co-ed groups. Yes.
For the pre-law usually, is there like a link you can send?
So what I would encourage you to do is to go to prelaw.unt.edu, sign up to receive email, join the campus course, and every email I send has the group me information. If you want it before I send my next email, though, you can just email me at wendy.watson, and I can send you that link. No problem. Now, I talked 75 miles an hour specifically so we would have time for questions. And like I said, the question on the slides thing, I can't access that in the anonymous way that I thought I could. So, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How would the whole bar and like law school, like the whole process work if you're like taking international?
That's a great question. So international law, I have a lot of students who are interested in that. First, I think it's important to know that there's sort of 2 paths in international law. There's like international business law, and there's international human rights law. There's also international environmental law, but we'll lump that in with the human rights. So typically, if you're practicing some form of international law, you're going to want to be licensed somewhere in the US. If only so that you can then be a member of the federal bar. You are more likely to end up in federal court if you're dealing with like a treaty issue or an international child custody case. That's where those things are going to be. And then a fair number of law firms, for example, have a presence around the world. Usually how that works is, let's say if you're licensed here in, say, New York or DC or someplace like that, and you're working at The Hague. The Hague is itself an international body, so they will recognize your license. If you want to work in Berlin, right, you will probably partner with an attorney who's licensed in Germany. So you would, you might do all the work, but they would have to come with you to court. Those sorts of arrangements are pretty common in legal circles. If you were licensed here in Texas and you needed to do something in Oklahoma, you'd have to find an Oklahoma attorney to sit with you and sign your papers. So that you would still be able, if you're interested in international law, you still probably want to go to a US law school, and you'll probably want to be licensed in at least one state in the US, but it may not matter which one. Yeah. But if you're interested in international law, I would encourage you to look at the coasts. There are schools in Texas, obviously, that do that, what UT does, for example, but you're going to have better networking opportunities in DC, New York, Philadelphia, LA. Yes, ma'am.
And I thought it was if, let's say that, like, I take the exam in Texas, but I live at a different state, do I have to retake the bar exam in that state in order to practice?
A great question. So theoretically, yes, you do. There are exceptions. So Texas is now one of 38 states that doesn't have its own bar exam. Instead, they give what's called the uniform bar exam. This is fantastic, right? Because this means that as long as you hit the appropriate score, you can be licensed in Texas and any other state. Right? You have to pay the money to be licensed, but you can use your bar results that you get in Texas someplace else. There are also exceptions. For example, a lot of states will have reciprocity agreements. So if you've been working as an attorney in Wisconsin for 5 years and you don't have any ethics violations, you can start practicing in Minnesota, right? Again, you have to apply, but they'll just let you. But in theory, yes, you have to take the bar. You have to be licensed according to the rules of every state, and that's not necessarily automatic. There was a question online about retaining information for the LSAT. Because it's a skills test, you don't actually have to memorize anything, which for me, great. The way you, but it's sort of like doing a cartwheel, right? I say this as though I could do a cartwheel, which 100% I could not ever in my life. But I imagine that when you do a cartwheel, you don't stop and think about it, you just do it, right? That's where you want to get to with the LSAT. And the way you get there, just like with a cartwheel, is practicing. So you have somebody correcting your form, that's the learning process. And then you just practice, 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 practice. LSAC has a resource called Prep Plus, which is digital versions of over 70 LSAT actual tests. And you can get access to that like $99 for a year. And you can just take tests till the cows come home. Kind of want to pace yourself because eventually you will run out of actual tests. But practice is honestly the best way to get to the point where you don't need to think too hard before you answer the questions. Follow-up question was whether I recommend self-study or a tutor. Totally depends on the person. My current advice for everybody. Again, I like the long-term plan, right? Studying for a long time. How many of you are familiar with Khan Academy? Done algebra or something like that with them? So LSAC, the people who administer the test, partnered with Khan Academy, and they created a free online curriculum. So what I recommend is if you're giving yourself about a year to study, spend the first 4 to 6 months on Khan Academy. Log in and then lie to it. If you're going to take the test in June of 2023, lie and say you're going to take it in January of 2023. It doesn't care. Like no one's going to hold you to it. What that will do is that way Khan Academy will create a syllabus for you that pushes you through their curriculum specifically for you by January, right? Then you've got several months on the back end. And by then you will know what you need. You may need to take a class with a human at the front of the room talking to you. Some people really need that. And the LSAT doesn't just get you into law school, it's the #1 determinant of how much money they give you. So this is an investment, right? You may spend $1,200 prepping for the LSAT, but if it gets you $10,000 a year to go to law school, that is an excellent return on investment, right? So after you get through Khan Academy, you will know, I need a class. I'm doing great, I just need to practice. I really liked learning online, I just need more, right? In which case there are online programs out there that you would pay for, but you can sort of build on your Khan Academy experience. Or you may determine that there's just like one type of question you just can't do, right? In which case a tutor is a great option because that way they can focus you specifically on what you need, right? And there are tons of resources out there. There are several companies locally that provide LSAT tutoring. Some of the national companies also provide tutoring packages. There are lots of companies that have live and virtual but real-time classes. There are lots of online classes. This is quite an industry, honestly. There are people making tons of money teaching you to take the LSAT, but always do the free thing first, especially because that will help you figure out what you specifically need. And it may not be what the person sitting next to you needs.
There's one question, like when you asked
Did we
online.
miss? Oh, Brenda, that's a great question. After submitting your application, how long would we wait for a response? Man, I wish I knew the answer to that. So some people have already been, no, none of my students, but I know that some people have already been admitted. I had a student once who submitted an application and got admission and a huge scholarship within 7 days. Amazing. I have also known people who have waited months, like 4 or 5 months. They were convinced they weren't going to get in. And then they not only got into the school of their dreams, but they got a huge scholarship. The schools are always kind of guessing what the application cycle is going to look like. Sometimes they get it wrong. A couple of years ago, they got it really wrong. They started admitting people because they were getting all these great applications. They were admitting and admitting and admitting, and the applications never slowed down. And then they thought, well, a lot of these people surely will not actually come to our law school, even though we admitted them. And everybody said yes. So I think a couple of years ago, there were multiple schools that had more than double the number of students that they could actually accommodate, admitted and on their way. And so they ended up like basically paying people to skip a year and wait and come in later, or to go someplace else. As a result, the following year, law schools were very slow in responding. They wanted to wait and see what came in next week before they committed to anything. So you could hear immediately, or you could wait months. It's And there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's not like the longer you wait, the less likely you are to get in. There's just no telling. I wish I had a better answer for that question, because I know that that's frustrating. I don't like waiting either. Thank you, that's fair. Well, it's not really fair, honestly. It's not fair to you guys, but it's the reality. Any other questions?
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
So if I take, like, let's say I take the bar exam here in Texas,
Mhm.
I can just buy a license, like, with my local.
I don't know whether New York is a UBE state or not. I don't know whether it's a uniform bar exam state, but so I think that the score in Texas is like a 127 on the UBE. You have to score higher than that. Let's say you get a 127. If you go to a state where they require you have a 130, you're gonna have to take the exam again. Or if you go to a state that has its own bar, like California, I know California's not gonna ever do the UBE. You would have to take the California bar. But there are some circumstances where, yeah, all you would do is just pay the fee, right? Because they consider that you have a record that convinces them that you are capable of practicing law in their state. And so as long as you pay the money to join their bar, you're fine. And the federal bar, to practice in federal court, you need to be licensed in a state, any state, doesn't actually matter which one. And then you need 2 people who are members of the federal bar to vouch for you. And then they say, yes, we promise she's good.
So which state bar do you think would be best for international? Is it just not that?
I would recommend for international law, I tend to think that whatever New York is doing is probably a good choice, or California. California bar though is well, so is New York. I wish I knew if New York was, does anybody know if New York is UBE? It is? Fantastic. So do the UBE. The California bar is notoriously difficult. There's a really interesting documentary called A Lawyer Walks into a Bar. And it follows a group of people taking the California bar exam, like getting ready for it, taking it, and then waiting for the results. And results are always announced. Now they're online. And so there's just like a day when you log in and you just hit refresh, waiting to see if your name's on the list. There are people who've taken the California bar 30 times and never passed it. They just keep taking it. So, I mean, obviously people practice in California, you can do it, but it is a hard test. The UBE is going to be more closely related to the classes you take in law school, no matter where you go to law school. So I would go New York.
We should start from, like, trying to make sure we have our specialty well defined.
That's a great question. So your JD, right, that degree you need, you don't pick a major, right? There are some schools that have like tracks and things that you can do that are really just set up to guide you through some classes that they think will be useful to you, but it's not required. So you can go to law school having absolutely no idea what kind of law you want to practice. That is an absolutely valid thing to do. I know that sounds bizarre, but really, if you go to a good law school, they're going to prepare you to do anything. You can go to law school, never take a class in environmental law, and end up being an environmental lawyer. Because what they're teaching you in law school isn't the law, they're teaching you procedure, which is going to be the same no matter what area of law you're practicing. And they're teaching you how to think like a lawyer, right? And how to research the law. So, like when I graduated, I had focused most of my coursework on administrative and constitutional law. I applied for one job that was con law based, one job that was for the Federal Election Commission. I'd never taken anything on election law, to be clear, but I'd taken administrative law, good enough. I applied for criminal law jobs, which I'd never taken criminal law. Yeah, there was very little relationship between the classes that I took and the jobs that I applied for. And I was equally qualified or unqualified for all of those positions. So if you have a specialty, right, if you know, like, oh, 100%, this is what I want to do, then you can use that to help identify schools that might help you get there. If you don't know, that's also totally fine. Just go to a good general law school, because that JD is going to allow you to practice in anything. It's the same degree.
Theoretically, like if you become a lawyer, you can practice or soft field basically at will if you find a proper job.
You can absolutely switch fields, yeah. And people do, all the time, honestly. You know, it can be a little bit of a challenge, right? Because you start to build a network and people and relationships, and then you're going to switch and you need a whole new set of people. But actually, one of my former students absolutely did this. She started in family law. To tell everybody that they should never practice family law. It's, well, yeah, you do now. It's horrible, right? Like, it is the most emotionally devastating area of the law to practice. And Daphne completely burned out. She messaged me on LinkedIn early last fall saying, I need out. And she's now out. She is doing something else entirely. She's still practicing law, but she completely switched her field. And she'd only been out for a few years. So it absolutely can be done.
What's the biggest challenge? What brings them out?
I know from talking in the hallway that you probably know exactly what burdens people out. You're seeing people at their absolute worst, right? When people are going through a breakup, their marriage is dissolving. Honestly, it's worse if they don't have any property to divide up, because then they focus on the kids and they get really petty about things that very clearly don't matter. But they get ugly. People are ugly. I have students who are always, oh, you know, I don't want to practice criminal law because what if I get shot? You're way more likely to be attacked if you're a family lawyer than a criminal lawyer. Way more likely. People are the worst when they're going through that and probate. So when they're divvying up some poor dead person's stuff, people turn into monsters. Otherwise beautiful, lovely people turn into monsters. Yeah, Kaylin is actually.
I work as a legal assistant. I just want to share an anecdote. But today, I walked in and my new boss was, oh, well, we got a threat to the office today, so we're keeping the front door locked. And it was like the assumed to be ex.
Yep.
Threatening to come to the office.
Kill people.
Like first day.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm burnt out. I've been there like 3 months.
it's hard. It's hard. I mean, God love the people who do it, because people are going to get divorced and they need attorneys, right? We had a case, a family, like these people were fighting, and I mean, they did not have. There's a way to say that, but I can't say it since we're recording. They didn't have much, right? They did not have a lot of material things. But they were fighting over every single scrap they had. And it literally got down to a potted plant. And they're going back and forth. Plant. And the judge, I worked for the judge, and the judge is like, seriously, guys, it's a plant. And finally, the guy said, fine, she can have the plant, but the pot is mine. Oh!
They don't invite family lawyers to like And if I could say that they're gonna invite me.
That's funny. Yeah, you just shouldn't invite a family lawyer to a wedding. Cause they'll tell you how the marriage is gonna end. It's ugly. Yeah, but in any event, if you decide you want to try, right, and you do it, and then you burn out, you can change your specialty. You're not locked in. Yes,
Any recommendations for nutrition program?
that's a good question. So internships are great if you can get them, particularly because it gives you the chance to see what the actual practice of law is. Locally, Neil Durant's, yes, Neil Durant's is hiring right now. Yeah, he pays. That's actually unusual. Most internships are unpaid. Student Legal Services often hires our students as interns. They provide legal services for students. There's an attorney here in town named Tony Ross. His actual name is John, but he goes by Tony. I don't know what's up with that. But he always has just a bunch of our students as interns, and he's apparently really great to work for. He does mostly criminal stuff. Mr. Durant mostly does family law.
Family, I get a couple of days
Yeah,
this year.
yeah, he's on Locust.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then all of the county attorney district attorney's offices, Denton, Collin, Dallas, and Tarrant, all have internship programs that you can apply to if you're interested in prosecution or criminal law. Those I think do not pay. Tony pays some of his interns, but not most of them. Mr. Durant's does pay. Most internships are going to be unpaid. And if for some reason you can't get an internship, don't worry about it. Law schools don't expect you to have an internship. They know that there are way more pre-law students than there are internships. So they're not going to discount you just because you haven't had that experience. If you can't get an internship and you want to see how court works, you can ask to shadow an attorney for like a day or two. So have sort of a crash course, and you can go to court. With the exception of juvenile proceedings, almost all court proceedings are open to the public. So you can just show up at the courthouse on McKinney and walk in, have to go through security, but then find something that's happening. I just will walk into a courtroom. I have assigned that to classes before as like a term project, and students often find that if they're the only person in the gallery watching, which is most of the time, the judge or one of the attorneys will ask who they are. And as soon as they know you're thinking about law school, they will tell you their life story and answer all of your questions. It can actually be a weirdly rewarding experience.
Dr. Lenner's class, judicial process in America, he requires two,
To court visits.
yeah.
Yeah. That's the class in which I usually do it as well. So again, if for some reason you can't get an internship and you just want to see like, what do people do? That is a good alternative. You can also now, YouTube is like fantastic. You can watch trials on YouTube. Don't just watch the highlight reels, because most of court is not nearly as interesting as those highlight reels. But you can watch whole trials that are live streamed, and you can also watch law school classes. The pre-law YouTube page has a playlist, and you can watch a contracts class from University of Virginia Law School and a torts class from Texas A&M Law. And you can see what law school's like as well. There's a question about the deadline for the LSAC fee waiver. That is a good question. So I mentioned that you were going to give LSAC a ton of money. There's a way around it for some people. They do have a fee waiver program. They're going to ask for your firstborn, right? It is a difficult application to go through. Oh gosh, yes, Brenda, please add that onto your resume. The LSAC fee waiver, if you get it, it covers the LSAC account fee. The paid account for them, the credential assembly service, is $195. It will cover you taking the test twice. That's $200 a pop. It will cover Prep Plus, those online tests. So that's another $99. And it will cover 6 fee waivers for the LSAT portion of your application fee. Those are $45 each. So it is, I added it up one time, it's about $1,000 that it's worth. So it's worth applying for it. Because one of the things that comes with it is Prep Plus, I encourage you to apply for it as early as you can. Your junior year, right? Like when you're doing your FAFSA, your junior year, do the LSAC fee waiver at the same time because it's going to be the same documents. I don't know exactly how close you can get and still get the fee waiver. I do know that it takes them a while to process your initial application. And if you are rejected, you want to appeal because they give way more waivers on appeal than they do the first time around. So don't take no for an answer. Keep asking because really it's worth it.
Can international students apply or are there like restrictions?
I actually don't know. I don't know if you need to be a permanent resident or a US citizen in order to get the fee waiver. You can certainly apply to law school. That's not an issue. The bigger issue, if you're not a citizen or a US resident, permanent resident, is going to be paying for law school. Law schools aren't going to care. They're going to still give you merit scholarship, the same as anybody else. But to the extent that you have to make that up with loans, obviously that's an issue. But I can find out for you. Drop me an email and I'll look to see whether the fee waiver's open.
I was thinking in general, do you think it would be better to find the very best highest ranked school you can, or would it be better to apply the one that's like more likely to give you more money? If it's like, if you have like a good LSAT score, to apply one that has like 5 points below is their median.
So that's where we want to like have a personal conversation. Because again, some schools you like, if depending on what it is you want to do, right? Sometimes you just need to go to the best law school you can get into, right? Because otherwise you're not going to get that job that you want. My usual recommendation, if you can swing it, you never want to apply to a school you wouldn't attend. That's a given. But I recommend applying to a couple of schools where you're the kind of typical student. Apply to that dream school and then apply to a few schools that are still fit for purpose, right? Still going to get you the job you need, but where you might be the big fish and you might get a lot of money. So you kind of want to cast your net wide. Yeah. Website says US or Canadian citizen or US national. With some more specific on the website. Thank you, Brooke. Appreciate that. The website is lsac.org, lsac.org, and I would definitely contact them. If it's not clear, call them. Don't email them, call them. They answer their phone, but they don't always respond to emails. I think we might be getting booted out of here in 5 minutes. Yeah. Oh, the fee waiver gives this free score preview. Hi, Tola. Yeah, there's a program that LSAC offers now called Score Preview, where you can pay extra money and you can wait until you see your score before you decide whether or not you're going to cancel. Do not pay for it. If it comes with the fee waiver, awesome, but don't pay for it. Because worst case scenario, you got a crappy score and you take the test again. The law schools are going to still look at your higher score. So the cancellation is not important. Okay, I definitely think we're getting booted. So thank you guys for everybody who was at home. I appreciate it. And I'm going to sign off now.